Now, moving along to this top story as well, judgment has been reserved in the matter against John Hlope's appointment to the Judicial Service Commission. The case was brought by the Democratic Alliance, Freedom Under Law and Corruption Watch. Hlope was impeached for gross misconduct. They've argued that the National Assembly's decision to appoint Hlope was unlawful.
Our case is not against Dr. Hlope. Our case is against the National Assembly. We say you, National Assembly, failed to exercise your public power in the public interest. That is why we're here, and that is why we submit that the manner in which you went about this decision was unlawful.
Hlope's lawyer says his impeachment is not a reason to disqualify him from serving on the JSC since he plans to appeal it.
As I said, there is no application to reinstate the Supreme Court of Appeal yet. When the funds are available, that application will be reactivated. There are no funds to raise for the appeal. So when that is done, then it would. And Honourable Justice, I just want to paint this picture. What the state placed Judge President Hlope is inimical to the dignity of the office of the judge, because essentially what they were asking him to do was to go and look for money elsewhere. So Judge President Hlope could go and look for money from a rich person who litigates a lot in this court, and get a lot of money to litigate further his impeachment. That's undesirable. That is why we still are complaining about the fact that the state has a duty under Section 1654 to make sure that judges who face misconduct hearings are supported. Because you're not supporting the judge, you're supporting the principle of judicial independence.
Staying with that story, DA spokesperson Willie Aucamp joins us for more on that. Willie, thank you so much for your time this evening. You've also just heard a recap of what happened in court today. Of course, you were taking very close attention to that, paying a lot of attention to that. Just an overview of what you made of the defence's arguments today.
Yeah, good evening, myself. No, we don't take that argument as a valuable argument. The argument and the case before the court is whether the National Assembly erred when they made their decision to appoint Mr. Hlope as a member of the Judicial Service Commission. So there's a lot of arguments that was uttered that we think are sideshows. The matter before the court is whether a person with the character of John Hlope, a disgraced former judge, has got the power to sit on the Judicial Services Commission, a commission that will appoint judges, and a commission that will appoint a judge in his former position as the judge president of the Western Cape. So we don't believe that those arguments are valid. The arguments that our lawyers put in front of the court, we believe are valid. If you look at the responsibility that the National Assembly has got to always protect the independence of the judiciary, and that was what our whole case was put around for and was put in front of the court.
Yeah, and we'll get into those sideshows that you speak of as well. But also, Advocate Dalimpofu had said that the National Assembly considered Dr. Hlope's impeachment when it did debate his nomination and found no legal impediment to his appointment to the JSC. Are you saying that you think that the National Assembly is not capable in this case of making a sound decision?
Well, the National Assembly made a mistake, and that is what we said. That is what the second part of our court application is for a review of the National Assembly's decision. The Constitution says that the Judicial Services Commission consists of a number of people, of which 6 people are from the National Assembly. Then the Constitution is very clear that 3 of those 6 people must come from opposition benches. It does not prescribe a formula, and it does not say what party must get what amount of seats. So the National Assembly must always apply the Constitution, and in the Constitution it is very clear that the duty of state organs, such as the National Assembly, is to protect the independence of the judiciary, and that is of utmost importance. And we believe that the National Assembly erred when they took that decision to appoint Mr. Hlophe in the Judicial Services Commission, and that must be revised.
They also say that this matter that has been brought to the court, the respondents in this case, Dalim Mpofu, saying that the DA is being petulant by taking this matter to the court. In fact, saying, and I quote, that you want to lynch someone and not happy with killing them, but must hang them on a tree so passers-by can see. You can call that rule of law, but it's not the rule of law. It's the rule of the jungle. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, that is a typical Dalim Mpofu type of statement. If you look at a lot of the defenses that he undertook over the last years, it's a very dramatical thing to say, but it is steering away from the facts in this matter. And the facts in this matter is that there is a disgraced former judge that was impeached because of his improper actions, and now that person was elected to sit on the same body that firstly impeached him, but also the body that must now in the future appoint new judges. And that cannot be. Irrespective of the theatrics of Mr. Mpofu, this is not a TV show. It is a court of law where the independence of that same court is in jeopardy if a person like Mr. Hlophe will sit on that Judicial Services Commission.
Would you say that you wanted Dr. Hlophe to face more consequences other than being impeached, considering what he was impeached for? I mean, do you think that it was appropriate to just impeach him, or do you think that there should be more consequences? Because they're accusing you of saying that, look, he's already faced the music for what he was being accused of. Why go further on to punish him?
Well, this is not punishing Mr. Hlophe or Dr. Hlophe. It's definitely not punishing him. It is protecting the law. We cannot put the interest of an individual above the interest of our judicial system. And if we then put this case in front of the court to prevent Dr. Hlophe from being a member of this commission, it's not something against him as a person. We would have done that if it was anybody else. We cannot have a situation where an impeached person and whose character is definitely not above board to then serve on the Judicial Services Commission. We must remember that we expect from our judges to have a character that is untainted. They must really be above any forms of scrutiny. They must cut the grade for being a judge. Then in the same breath, having a former disgraced judge, a person that it has been proved whose character is definitely tainted, to sit on that commission is not acceptable, and that is why. So it's definitely not a personal attack on Dr. Hlophe, but an attack, rather a protection of the Constitution and of the independence of the judiciary, which is definitely at stake here. We have been asked the following question as well, and that is that, but he's one person on that commission. Will he really make a difference? The problem comes in that we are sitting with a possibility of a lot of judges that will apply for higher positions in the judiciary that will not be willing to face that commission if Dr. Hlophe is sitting on that panel. So this is an attack on the judiciary's independence, having him there, and we've got to, from the Democratic Alliance side, got to and will always protect the Constitution of South Africa.
What happens in the case in future, right, where there is perhaps another MP where a political party feels that they aren't the right person to sit on a certain committee or something, but the National Assembly has found that they are okay to be on that portfolio committee or to be a member of parliament? Is it going to be a case where we're constantly running to the courts to sort this out? Should this apply to other MPs?
I think it's therefore very important, firstly, that we get a review on this case so that the courts can give an opinion. We must remember that when the founders of our Constitution, when they wrote the Constitution, I do not foresee that they could at that stage thought about a former impeached judge sitting as a member of parliament on the Judicial Services Commission. So legislation cannot always cater for every possible thing that might happen. So the other option is also, after the court has given judgment here, to come with legislation and to put in legislation the situation or the handling of matters where people that has been impeached, in other words, fined by a body of government or of the state as not being fit for their positions, not to be able to sit in certain positions. And that is something that we've got to walk through. My belief is that a person that has been impeached cannot serve there, and I would go as far to say that can not even serve as a member of parliament. If you've been impeached, you cannot represent the people.
Speaking of legal processes as well and that impeachment, according to his lawyer as well, he plans on appealing it. And that's why they also feel that he should not be disqualified.
Well, he does not know the law if he thinks that he can appeal that. Judges are appointed by the president. And the president does that on the advice of the Judicial Services Commission. Judicial Services Commission. And that is what the president has done here. It is the prerogative of the president, and the Constitution is very, very clear on the processes that must be followed when a judge is removed from office. Mr. Hlope was the first judge in the history of South Africa that has been removed. The panel sat, the Judicial Services Commission sat, they heard evidence, they had cross-examination opportunities. It was a whole system that happened before them, and they made the advice, or given the advice to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly overwhelmingly decided that he must be removed out of that position, and that is how he became the first impeached judge that lost his job. And then the President of the Republic informed him that he is not a member of the bench or a judge anymore, and he was removed. So if he wants to appeal that, he can. And maybe that is something that Mr. Mpofu will again take on to catch attention, but I can tell you now that it will not be successful.
Yeah, and you're also mentioning the kind of character of members of parliament. You're saying you could even stretch it as far as saying somebody like Dr. John Hlope, who's been impeached, should not even be a member of parliament. When we're talking about the kind of characteristics of these people that we want to represent us in the National Assembly. But also, what about those who've been accused of gross things like racism, where there are serious racism allegations as well? Should they be allowed to be members of parliament and go and make and represent South Africans as well? When we know the history that we come from, you also mentioned the forefathers who wrote our constitution and that they wouldn't have imagined the situation that we find ourselves in with Dr. John Hlope. But I also think they wouldn't imagine that we'd have members of parliament who have been accused and have been seen and taped saying very racist things as well.
People like that should not be in parliament, period.
You've got people like that in your own party, sir.
Well, that is why there are processes that have been instituted against that person. That process is ongoing. And should any person, whether it's, and we are talking now about Mr. Ronaldo Gous, so let's call it by the name. If Mr. Ronaldo Gous is found guilty by the Federal Legal Commission of the Democratic Alliance, we got to see what the sanctions would be. But whether it's Mr. Ronaldo Gous or whether it's anybody else, if you are guilty or if you made yourself guilty of any racism in whatever form, I believe and the DA believe that there should not be a place for you in parliament. You should not be able to represent the people if you've got a racist background and if you've got racism as one of the ways in which you live your life. There should not be any place, but we are also a party for the rule of law. The same reason why we are have approached the court to get Mr. Hlope removed from the bench, that is to protect the rule of law as well. We are a party of the rule of law, and any allegations of racism must go through a trial, and that is what happens with Mr. Ronaldo Gous in this instance. I can confirm that the trial against Mr. Ronaldo Gous is currently ongoing. We have from the DA side within 1 month instituted the trial, started to lead evidence. So that trial is ongoing, and I cannot therefore communicate anything of what is going on in the trial. I'm not a member of that panel, but what I can say to you is that we take it very seriously, and should he or anybody be found guilty of making racist remarks, I believe that they should not serve as members of parliament.
Well, we'll await to see that outcome of the DA's investigation too. Thank you so much for your time.